Who is it that's recruiting really well and who's upticking in recruiting? Strictly high school, okay? Not the portal. Who is recruiting high school football players at a noticeably better level? Who's trending up? Missouri's trending up. Missouri's really trending up in high school recruiting. Over the past 5 cycles, they have finished 51st, 26th, 15th, 34th, and 20th. That means this year's roster has 2 top 20 classes baked into it. For a team expected to dip a little bit after an 11-win season, just remember that. There are 2 top 20 classes baked into this roster, and they've gotten their act together in the portal. And I think some head coaches out there kind of leave that to their collectives or their GM. Eli Drinkwitz rolls those sleeves up, man. He gets involved there, keeping his players and going and getting other players. I've told you I think they backfilled their defensive staff very effectively, and now they have an 11-win season to go sell on the recruiting trail. Pay attention to Missouri. I don't necessarily think that last year was some blip on the radar, some flash in the pan. That doesn't mean they'll win 11 again this year, but it does mean they won't be an easy out this year. There are 2 really good classes baked into that roster. Elsewhere in the SEC, Auburn University, not to be confused with the University of Auburn. They've always recruited well. Okay, Auburn as a logo has sold itself fairly well over the years. So even when you think they were a disaster, it wasn't disastrous. But over the past 5 years, 7, 19, 21, here comes Hugh Freeze, 18, 10. There's a very noticeable Hugh Freeze spike here. And imagine watching them this year. If I'm a high school senior and Auburn's already got the same number of blue chippers committed in the 2025 class as Alabama does. I think they got 8 of them. But if I'm an uncommitted blue chipper and I'm in Bessemer, Alabama, Ackworth, Georgia, Ocala, Florida, and I'm watching Auburn, you know what I'm about to see this year? I'm about to see a metric ton of true freshmen play. Hugh Freeze admitted it on our show. They're not all ready, but they're going to have to play this year anyway. I'm going to look, and I'm going to say, wow, well, that's the place to go. It's Auburn. It's a premier brand in the SEC, and it looks like they're handing out playing time there left and right. I can go get my spot pretty quickly. I think Auburn's about to have another really, really strong class. They are very much trending up. The Big Ten has gotten its act together. This was something I expected. You've heard me talk about this, I think, for the better part of 2 years now. You'll remember when the Big Ten inked their new media deal. I said behind the scenes, the talk was a little bit different than it was out front. I really picked up on this at Media Days a couple of years ago. I had someone, I'll keep their name out of it. They're very high up in the grand scheme of things in the Big Ten. They said, with this new money comes a new responsibility on our part. And what they went on to explain to me is, in no uncertain terms, the exchange for us cashing these big media rights checks is we got to be good past the top layer. We got to be good past just Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State. Because no one's paying us for 3 teams. They're paying us for a conference product. So they said, it's been explained, it's understood at our B and C tier institutions as it relates to football. You guys got to take hiring more seriously. You got to be more aggressive in recruiting. Take football more seriously. Invest to a max degree in football. It's happening. It's happening at Wisconsin. They've gone from 58th to 23rd in recruiting under Luke Fickell the past 2 cycles. And remember, when you got Luke Fickell as your head coach, it's great if they're recruiting well because you already know they're excellent in evaluation. They're excellent in development. The guy did at Cincinnati what no one has any business doing at Cincinnati. They will do it at Wisconsin. I got little doubt about that. Wisconsin's taking things seriously up there. Oregon has been taking things seriously. They've just come to the Big Ten now. 13 to 9 to 3. That's their 3-year elevation in recruiting rankings. You know what they do in the portal, but they're also doing it in high school recruiting. Some teams go to the portal because they don't recruit high school well. Oregon kills it in high school recruiting and then just does it in the portal because they feel like it. They are the second best average over the last 5 years in the Big Ten when it comes to recruiting. And I said the day it was announced they're going to the Big Ten that it was going to be thought that Oregon's going to have to adjust to life in the Big Ten. Oregon is sitting right at the head table in the Big Ten. The moment they get there, the only team that's comparable to them in talent acquisition in the Big Ten is Ohio State. Uh, Oregon's doing it at a higher level than Michigan. They're doing it at a higher level than Penn State. And then you just have to produce on the field. But that's not what this segment's about. This segment's about recruiting, so getting all the ingredients in the kitchen, and then you decide what you want to do with it on the stovetop. But Oregon's there. I'll tell you another team that we need to pay attention to. Another team that's really gotten itself in gear is Nebraska. Nebraska was always a prime candidate to do this, but Nebraska couldn't get out of Nebraska's way for a long time. Maybe Nebraska's starting to get its act together a little bit. From 41st to 25th to 18th. That's the 3-year recruiting ranking progression for Nebraska. I think we need to hold up the writing of the future of this sport as leaving Nebraska out of it entirely. I know what most of you think. Probably a supermajority of my audience thinks that Nebraska cannot do in the future what they did in the past. You got many reasons for thinking that. I think some of it's valid. There are certain disadvantages that this sport has dealt to programs like Nebraska, but it's not insurmountable. And the way the game's changing and affiliation with the Big Ten, therefore access with the ability to share that kind of revenue with players, it's going to keep Nebraska in the game. They just went and got the quarterback, Dylan Raiola. If that pans out, if that offense ends up being explosive this year, then, man, first off, Nebraska is going to be fun to watch because defensively they got it. Staff, players, defensively they got it. Can they sell that offense? Can they put an offense on the field they can sell this fall? If they do, they finished 18th last cycle. Nebraska will end up having their highest ranked recruiting class in a long time if they have an offense that they can immediately sell this year. Because once you've got the proof of performance, it's hard for people to negative recruit you anymore, especially when the proof of performance is being triggered by a true freshman quarterback who's not going anywhere. Kansas, we talked about Kansas already earlier in the show. Kansas has made staggering leaps and bounds improvement in recruiting. They've gone from 117th to 73rd to 44th. This is just Lance Leipold. He's not doing it alone, like his staff and the university's bought in. This is one man coming into a university and completely changing the trajectory of that program. They were the worst 5-year average in the Big 12 coming into this year in recruiting. Check out the next 5 years. If they can keep him, check out the next 5 years. We just did a segment earlier in the show. Someone predicted Kansas to make the playoff this year. And I looked you dead in the eyes through a camera and said, yeah, that's not all that crazy, actually. It could really happen. In football, guys, in football. Cincinnati, they're new to the Big 12. They're trending up. They went from 50th to, or they're up 25 spots. So they were 50th this past year. I'll tell you who else is trending up. Brigham Young, Central Florida, big time upward trending team right now. Central Florida may have pound for pound the highest long-term recruiting ceiling of any of these programs in the Big 12. And in the ACC, I think you know that Florida State is really trending up 20th to 19th to 12th under Mike Norvell. Miami, of course, under Mario Cristobal, 16th to 7th to 4th. So 2 classes now, 3 classes, a majority of Miami. This year's Miami roster is made up entirely of top 20 classes, and 2 of them are top 10, top 7, actually. And then they've portaled in guys like Cam Ward. Miami's got a really, really good roster this year. Is it a good team? Good roster. That roster could win the ACC. Can the team win the ACC? Georgia Tech's trending up under Brent Key. NC State's been trending in the right direction, probably a little more quiet over there. So you look at the odds to win the ACC this year. Jesse, I think they were 5th. I think NC State tied for 4th or 5th. And there's a reason, because they've got really good players baked into what will be their roster this fall. So we pay attention to this internally. We don't normally do segments like this, but if you think about a college football team and you think about the roster mainly being 4 classes of player, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, it doesn't take long to overhaul that thing, especially when you can do what you can do with roster churn and adjustment nowadays. So if you just recruit a couple or 3 cycles in a row of pretty good players, well, all of a sudden you start to think 25% of my roster, 50%, 60, 70% of my roster is made up of top 15 classes. It doesn't take long, and it goes a long way at the end of the year in explaining why some teams overachieve. Well, they overachieve because guess what? they had some good football players that you just didn't know a whole lot about because they weren't on the cover of preview magazines.